Welcome back, McFly subscribers. We will be continuing the bass series with this bass popper, and I will show you a couple different color combos that I like to use for fishing bass. Now, I will discuss this fly and its uses later in the video, as I'm sure you all want to get started tying right away, but in case you haven't seen this channel before, this is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
Okay, let's start tying. Place a hook securely in your vise. For a hook, I'm using these Resin O'Shaughnessy stainless in size 2, but the hook size will depend on the popper head size that you use. And I'm using these double barrel popper heads in medium. You will want to make sure that the hook has enough gap in between the hook point and where the popper will rest, and also enough shank left to tie in the tail materials when the popper is put on. Also, these popper heads don't have a hole pre-made. Now, one side has an indet, but no hole on the other, so we need to make one. Grab your bodkin and poke through the other side, and I like to have the hole slightly lower than the middle. Now, this is upside down, by the way. That was a fairly thin needle, so I'm going to use a larger bodkin to remount the hole a little bit more to make it easier to put the hook eye through. Now let's test to see if the hook can pass through, which it can. Okay, let's take that hook out for now. We will also need some thick thread, and today I'm using Vivus 140 power thread in chartreuse. Start your thread with about a hook eye gap from the hook eye and snip or snap off the waist. Then we will measure out to where the popper head extends back to, and then bring our thread down to that spot. Okay, that looks good. Now we can come back up about halfway. By the way, we are doing this to give a thread base for the glue to adhere onto and to help keep the popper heads on. Now these heads could spin around the round shank no matter how much glue that you put on them. So I get some heavy fishing line like this 25-pound fluorocarbon. And fluoro tends to be a little bit stiffer, which is great for this application. Just cut a small amount off, then we will tie this in perpendicular with some X-wraps. Now let's build up a thread base by coming up to an initial tie-in spot, and then back down, and up once again, before whip finishing and trimming off the waist. Now let's cut off the fishing line very short on both sides. What this does is create a flat area that, when glued in, will help keep this popper head from spinning. Now let's try to get the popper on the hook over the mono. Okay, that worked fine, so let's pull it off. Now we will need some glue, and this Loctite gel superglue works great, as the gel type superglues give you a little bit longer to adjust before the glue sets. Add a few dots around the thread base, and make sure some over the mono as well. Now with a steady and firm motion, push the popper head on, and make sure you quickly get into position, where it's not canted on one side or the other. Wipe off any excess glue, and by the way, I want to show you the front here. You want the hook eye to stick out slightly, with a little bit of gap between the popper cavity and the hook eye. Okay, we need to let that dry, and this can take a few minutes, so I like to make more heads and get a bit of an assembly line going. In fact, we will be doing an assembly line with multiple steps throughout this fly, so it's a good idea to tie many at once, to help save some downtime. Okay, I did 3, but I recommend 5 to 10 at a time. Now it's time to color up the bodies, and for that, permanent markers work great. I have a mix of these add markers, which are solvent-based, and colored Sharpies, which are alcohol-based. Most everyone has seen the Sharpies before, which have a precision tip. The add markers, though, have a chisel tip, which is handy for coloring large areas. These are the colors I'm using today. The main colors are the lemon yellow and chartreuse, and I have some accent colors as well. Okay, let's start coloring the popper heads. First, I make a yellow belly on this, and don't forget the mouth also. Then I color the rest of the mouth with this orange color. By the way, it might be easier to color the mouth area before you put the popper head on the hook. Oh, and I actually like to add slashes into the yellow belly, so it's kind of broken up and not a perfectly straight line. But this is all personal design preference, as it's all up to you how you want to color your popper heads. Okay, now with the light green color, which they call celery, I color about halfway up the popper head. Now for the chartreuse, which I'm also putting some slashes to break it up a bit. Also make sure you get around the lip of the eye cavity, and the top portion, making sure all the white is covered. Now I make dots with this green Sharpie, which is a slightly darker green color than the chartreuse. And now dots with the brown color. Okay, now we need some eyes to place in the eye cavity of the popper head. And I find with these medium-sized popper heads, these 5mm eyes from fish skull work great. Pull 2 off the swatch. Then place the eyes in the cavity, and sometimes you have to push them in, but they should fit perfectly. Okay, let's hang this up for the markers to dry and move on to coloring some other popper heads. Okay, I made a fire tiger color with an orange belly and black stripes on top, and a red head one. And get creative and tie these in whatever colors you want. Now we need to seal these popper heads so the color doesn't come off and the heads don't soak up any water. And the Solares Flex formula works great for this. It's a UV resin that flexes, and when a fish bites the fly, it can compress the foam. This Flex formula moves with the compression, keeping it from cracking, as opposed to this hard formula which cures hard and would crack with any bending. So make sure you use a flexible resin like this one from Solares. First we need to seal the eyes in, so place the dot on the eye, and then make sure it fills in around the sides of the eyes, filling up that gap. Then cure it in with your UV light, and do the same thing with the other eye. Now let's go ahead and seal the entire popper. Squeeze a little around the popper. Oh, and I almost forgot, we need to protect the hook eye. And I find a small amount of lead wire, or in this case, lead-free wire, works great. Just push it through the hook eye and give a little twist. Now we need a paintbrush to smooth out the resin, and you can get packs of 100 or more on Amazon for cheap. Or I think I got this one at Walmart. Either way, these disposable paintbrushes work great. Oh, and you can reuse them in between each fly in the same day if you want. This one I used for a previous popper, and I'm going to use it for this one here. Okay, let's start brushing this resin around the popper, trying to get an even coat. Oh, and don't forget the mouth cavity. Make sure it's an even coat by brushing over it a second time, and then spin the popper while curing with your UV light. Now you want to start by curing with the light further back for a slow cure, and then bring the light closer. Now there's a lot of resin to cure, so I generally let the light cure for a minute or so. In other flies, usually this cures very quickly, seconds in fact. Okay, let's pull out the wire, which should take any resin that was brushed over the hook eye with it. Now as you can see, this resin really makes the color pop, and gives it a nice shiny professional look. Okay, like I said, I like doing these in steps, so let's resin up some other heads now. How great does that look? I will say though, I didn't wait long enough for this to dry, as the marker was smeared a bit, so make sure you give the markers a couple hours to dry. Okay, back to the frog color, so let's finish up the rest of the popper by adding a tail. Start your thread right behind the popper head, and snip or snap off the waist. Now we need some marabou, and here I have some chartreuse marabou. Pull one feather off the hank and stroke up the fibers to align the tips. Let's measure out about a hook shank length, and then cut this off square. Put the butt end right up against the back of the popper head and make some wraps over it to hold it down. And then bring your thread back up to the popper head, cleaning up the marabou butt section. Then bring your thread down to the start of the hook bend, tying the marabou down as you go. Now for some flash. Today I'm using this really pretty chartreuse crystal flash. Cut 3 strands off the hank, then measure this flash to slightly longer than the marabou tail, and tie it in on the side of the hook. Then pull the forward-facing strands rearward and tie them down on the other side. Now we can clip them to equal length. By the way, save this flash as you can tie multiple flies with it. Okay, now I like using this whiting wet fly hackle to make legs. And I have this beautiful grizzly chartreuse pelt. Pull 2 feathers off that are similar in size and shape, and align the tips. Now measure this out against the fly, and I want this to extend out about 1.5 times the hook shank length. Once we have that measured, then we can rip off the fuzzies and extra fibers off the base of the stem. Okay, let's tie in these feathers one at a time on the side of the hook, and you want the curve of the feather to splay outward from the hook. Okay, now for the other feather on the other side. and then trim off the stems. Okay, now for some silly legs. And I have this bass jig replacement skirt here, and that will work just fine. It's basically the same thing as these silicone legs. However, there are some really awesome colors to be gotten with the fly tying silly legs, and more than I have here. But this color is what I wanted, so I will use the skirt. Cut 3 off the hank. Then tie this in on the side of the hook with a couple tight wraps, and then snip off the waist. Clip 3 more and then tie them in on the other side. Snip the waist off and then clean up the hook shank with some even wraps. Now for some dry fly hackle, and this whiting cape will work great. Now the feathers up towards the neck are small and fine, but we're actually looking for the wider feathers towards the base. And you can see that these have long fibers. Let's pull one off and then prepare the feather for tie-in by stripping off some of the fibers towards the base of the feather where the stem is more stiff. You can also clip off the excess stem. Tie this onto the hook with a couple X wraps to hold it perpendicular, and then wrap up onto the stem to fold it at a right angle. Clip off the waist and then wind up the hook shank, covering the rest of the stem. Now let's start wrapping the hackle onto the fly. Make 5 to 6 touching wraps, and don't worry if it's a bit messy. It will be mostly covered in the following step. Then capture the feather with a couple wraps over it, and then pull back all the fibers and wrap back over them slightly before trimming off the waist. Now for some more silly legs, and I have this brown and black striped legs. Pull off 3 legs. Then tie this in perpendicular to the hook shank with a couple X wraps. Pull back the legs and tie back over them, ensuring that they stay sticking out of the side of the hook. And then cut these to slightly longer than the hackle. Now for one more feather from the soft hackle saddle. Strip off all the fuzzy fibers at the base of the feather, then pinch just the tip of the feather and stroke back the remaining fibers. This will leave you with a small tie-in tag, but let's make this even smaller by trimming up the tag. Tie in this feather and bring your thread all the way up to the popper head. Grab the stem of the feather with these plunger-style hackle pliers and proceed to start wrapping the feather onto the hook with touching wraps, stroking back the fibers with each wrap. Wrap up right against the popper head and then capture the feather and trim off the waist. To cover up any thread wraps, I like to finish the collar with a bit of dubbing. This UV2 Diamond Bright is great stuff, but you could use Antron or whatever other dubbing you want to use. But I love the sparkle of this Diamond Bright. Okay, I'm going to use this peacock looking color, and you don't need much. Make a thin and tight noodle onto your thread and then wrap this around the collar. Now when you whip finish the fly, it will seat that whip finish under the dubbing, mostly hiding the thread. This also protects the whip finish, making it so you don't really need to cement the whip finish, but you can if you want. But there we have it, the finished bass popper. Now these can be tied with many different styles of tails, and I've been known to tie different kinds. But I really like the look and action of this tail style. With the feathers splayed outwards, and rubber legs forcing the collar outward as well, it looks a bit like a frog from the underside. This popper has worked really well for me in the past, but is fairly complicated to tie. You could go much simpler with a marabou tail, a little flash, maybe one set of rubber legs, and a dry fly hackle collar, and still have great action and catch some fish. But the heads of these take so long to make, I figure I should spend some time making great looking tail along with the great looking heads. Okay, here are some other colors I made today. The white with red head, which works great for redfish on the Gulf also, by the way. Here's a fire tiger version, which in my opinion is the best looking one, and bass seem to love these bright poppers. Now, this is just a small sample of color ideas, and with a set of colored Sharpies, which you can find cheap on Amazon, you can get creative and tie these in so many great color combos. Look up your local bass forage and try to mimic that, or try to mimic bass popper lures you see online. Okay, well, I'm almost finished with this month's series on bass flies. and almost done filling up my bass fly box. I started off this series with a Clouser minnow, one of the best and most versatile streamers ever created, that work for just about any fish species, especially bass. Then I tied up a crayfish pattern that I actually came up with. It is one that has caught me so many fish in so many places. And it's being sold in fly shops now, as a distributor liked this pattern so much that they accepted it in their books. Of course, now this popper, and next week I plan on tying up the game changer in this beautiful bluegill color scheme. While not very easy or quick to tie, there is no denying how amazing these flies perform. The bass seem unable to resist them, and the movement is just so lifelike as well. Just look at the way this thing moves. So make sure you're subscribed and click the bell notification so you don't miss any future videos like this game changer fly. Oh, and by the way, I will soon be selling these fly boxes on Amazon with free shipping. They're made entirely of foam, which means they float in case you drop it in the water. They're also not too thick, so they don't take up much room in your pack. Yet they can still hold some decent sized streamers without compressing the materials. And on both sides as well. The clasp is magnetic, and the magnets are very strong. And I've had these automatically close almost every time I've ever dropped them, which means you're less likely to lose flies due to clumsiness. Now, they're not available yet for sale, as it takes a while to get these up on Amazon. But I will link to my Amazon storefront so you can check out my other fly boxes. And keep checking back, because these foam boxes will be available soon. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Resin Fly. They made the hooks I use today, but they also make some of the best fly rods and reels for the money I have ever used. Best off, they're offering you all a discount. So if you're in the market for a new rod or a bunch of hooks or beads, go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout, and they'll give you 15% off of your first order with them. Okay, well, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do me a favor and click the like button. Also, please share my videos with all your fishing friends. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.